Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Apollo Art Analysis. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at a piece by the AI generative artist Surea.i labs. In this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about this crystalline charm here. We're going to talk about lucid creative expression, and we're also going to talk about the influences of Romanticism. So let's jump right into it. So whenever you first see this piece, you're likely going to be drawn towards this center crystal here. And this is actually slightly offset from the center, and it kind of invites the viewer to interact with the canvas a bit deeper. And so we see here the form of our crystalline subject is emphasized with a light on dark contrast. Of course, this darker aesthetic of the backing is the perfect neutral background to really emphasize the form to the highest degree possible. And so colors within this work, it's kind of like a dual set foundation here. And the dual set foundation I mainly see, it's kind of like a grayish blue. And then we also have, of course, this fiery orange. And this dance, this dual dance from the grayish blue to that orange really characterizes this piece in a ton of different ways. And this, of course, also feels like it's in harmony with the sunset here. Of course, if you compare the tones of that kind of fiery orange, that reddish, and you compare that to the crystal, it's pretty clear, it's in direct harmony with that aesthetic, and they both really complement each other very well. And so we see the mood of the work at hand, and it really is kind of this dark aesthetic. And I was talking to the original artist a bit, and the artist actually, this is intentional. The artist was going for a very ominous, very dark, and even a sense of impending doom within the scene at hand. And this is pretty interesting, of course. Very dark composition here, and what we're looking at appears to be a crystal on a small base here, and then it appears to either be in sand dunes or a beach. It's hard to say for sure. I do have the original prompt here, though. There we are. So the original prompt... Sorry about that. So we have, this was actually created in Midjourney and then ran through a couple iterations in Disco Diffusion to really evolve into the final piece we hear. And so with that in mind, I actually do have one of the original iterations. And so what we're looking at here, an ominous, erratic, fiery orange crystal buried with the sands of time at night by Frederick Church, by Edmund Blair Layton, at King's Quest Sierra Games. So with that in mind, of course, ominous, erratic, fiery orange crystal buried with sands of time at night. So sands of time, it's quite interesting. I was talking to the artist as well, and the artist is trying to depict different things in a much more poetic style. Instead of explicitly wishing for a specific scene, the artist is trying to be a bit more poetic in kind of the suggestions of what they're trying to figure out. So with that in mind, of course, we see the sands of time at night. So buried with the sands of time at night, that really is kind of like our aesthetic that we're looking at here. So that really results in this kind of, it is sand dunes, but it also kind of feels like a beach as well. It's really hard to put my finger on. But regardless of that, you of course see a clear difference in these two ones at hand. So in this one, of course, we have the very final piece. And this scene, what appears to be a crystal here in the center, very similar to this one, but this one is a lot more dynamic. You have what appears to be, there might be kind of like dragon eggs or some type of very, very ornate little balls here. And that very well may be coming from King's Quest by Sierra Games. Really old game that the artist liked. The artist was a big fan of that style and wanted to incorporate that within the scene at hand. And we really do. And there's a little bit of inscription here at the bottom. It's actually not in the original, but with this one, we do see it. And with Midjourney and Disco Diffusion, you can actually increase the resolution of your rendering. So that appears to be what we're looking at here. Just kept going with that and just see what the AI could just keep going and interpret. And of course, with that in mind, it's just incredibly impactful. And so we see crystals here, of course, in both scenes at hand. I'm going to remove this one here in a second. I really like the vibrant colors of this one with that red. Very, very intriguing. So that was the original that was created, I believe. And then this was then a higher resolution rendition of that as it kind of evolved and defined it more and more. And so we see a crystal here, and crystals are quite interesting because they really are kind of divine catalysts of light. And what I mean by that is if you put a crystal up to the light and have the light shine through it, it just emphasizes its impact to the highest degree possible. This really introduces a sense of visual energy and also denotes some degrees of divinity as well. And so with that in mind, of course, the artist talked about this kind of dark, kind of ominous aesthetic that we're looking at here. And this really allows the visual impact of the crystal to just, pop out to us and just strike us instantly. And this, of course, calls your attention, and it's really hard to look away, not going to lie. And so we do see a sense of dark divinity within the scene at hand. Of course, we talked about that ominous aesthetic, that very dark scene, and then, of course, the juxtaposition or the contrast that the crystal creates as a result of that. And so this piece, so like we said in the prompt here, Frederick Church by Ed Layton. So those are actually two Romanticism artists, and I have two pieces from each one here. Let's see what we can set up. Let me move here. Just gonna go about right there. Let me make this one a bit smaller. There we go. So the first influence is from Frederick Edwin Church, and this artist actually creates landscapes, so we can see that influence mostly in the background that we're looking at here. The second influence is coming from Edmund Blair Layton. It's actually kind of like a medieval fantasy artist. Definitely see influences there. And if you were to combine this, say, with this medieval fantasy aesthetic and combine it with the landscape setting, that's pretty much what we're looking at here. So just to see the AI interpret that is just absolutely fascinating, and we really see a clear result of that, to whether it's that landscape or that kind of medieval fantasy aesthetic. Both of those really work together. And so Romanticism is normally defined in a few different ways. Mostly it was defined about the 1800s to the 1850s was really its main peak. And in many ways, it was a kind of a response to the Industrial Revolution. And there was this sense that they wanted to go back to the old, that everything was kind of course, heating up. Everything was speeding up incredibly. And so the Romanticist artist really wanted to return to kind of that class. Instead of the classical, they wanted to return to more of the older styles. And so with that in mind, of course, you see that, say, in the landscapes, you see that in the medieval fantasy paintings as well. There is this sense that they want to go back to the medieval instead of the classical. And of course, we really see those fantasy tones within that as well. And so Romanticism is a very, very intriguing movement, personally, mainly because of its roots in fantasy. We see a lot of fantasy art nowadays. People absolutely love fantasy. We definitely see that within the work at hand as well. And so, like I said, this was created in Midjourney and then run with a few different iterations through Disco Diffusion. So you see the incredible power of AI generative art and what it can really do. So just an incredible piece, very fantasy, very divine. It gives a very kind of medieval vibe here as well. This is coming everywhere from the influence of Frederick Church in the backing to Edmund Blair Layton in the much more medieval fantasy, much more deliberate there. And then, of course, the influence of that older game, King's Quest by Sierra Games. So all of that really combines to create a fantasy work, very immersive, very divine crystalline experience as well. And it's almost impossible to look away. Very stunning piece coming from the artist Surea.i Labs. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. Go check out Surea.i Labs' other works. Artist is doing a bunch of really good stuff, and the artist actually works with a lot of kind of archaic religious themes, even the supernatural at times. So all of that, I'm really here for it, and I love to study this artist's work. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. Go check out some of the Romanticism period. Very, very good reference for fantasy, and you will not be disappointed. My name is Apollo. This was Apollo Art Analysis, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you'd like to support our work directly, please check out our Apollo community tokens. Apollo Art Exchange is an ecosystem of art appreciation which elevates artists each and every day. Thanks for listening.